they leveled up their design a few years ago. They haven't invested in that area for a while in their application design, and I think that's past due.
Yeah.
And then the performance one, like, I don't know. I think they're getting better there, but if they really want to be something...
Yeah, like where people, like they don't lose people once they get something stood up, right? You want to be able to scale.
And I know that's what they're trying to do right now, but it's like you wouldn't go use Amazon services if half the time...
I was going to say, that's probably the biggest thing right there that you just said that we had. You know, we probably might even still be building on it, honestly.
I mean, a lot, like most companies are building their products on top of other people's products. It's not uncommon. Yeah. It's, you know, it is what it is. But for them... I'm not against it, but I have to say at a certain point, I'd be considering moving myself off it.
Yeah.
I don't have that kind of level of security in it yet.
Welcome to The Experience, brought to you by Weave.com, a show that explores what it takes to compete on customer experience and build an online company that can last decades. As always, thanks for being a supporter of the show.
For today, we have a product called Bubble. And Clayton has a drink paired with it, so maybe you can tee up the drink.
So our drink is called a Southside Fizz. So Fizz one, right? Because we need to have something kind of bubbly. For bubble would be appropriate.
Perfect.
But there's multiple layers, Jay. It's not just merely the bubbles. So as we'll find, Bubble itself is pretty interesting, and I think one of the things that's interesting is how it lets people take pretty common pieces. Like, so they're about building applications, letting people build software. And they let people take pretty common applications, like most applications are built to the same parts. It has like 5 or 10% that's different. So this drink's interesting too, where it has pretty basic parts. It's actually similar to some other things, but it's this combination of those interesting little simple ingredients and those foundational ingredients that makes a whole like different kind of drink. Okay. Really refreshing. Really, like, this is one you could have any time of year.
I mean, even looking at it like an eye check, it almost looks like a mojito.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
It's probably, it's in the taller glass.
With the mint thing on it. But yeah,
have you tasted it yet?
No, have you?
Yeah, of course I did.
All right. So yeah, this, if you're not watching the show, it's a tall like Collins glass. It looks just like a mojito. There's a mint and a cucumber on top.
Well, yeah, that's part of that. So yeah.
But let's give it a whirl.
What are your thoughts?
Well, it's not bad.
Yeah.
Definitely getting the mint, but like.
You need the cucumber in there?
Yeah, it's.
Kind of gives it like a different dimension to it.
That's way good. Definitely like the bubble piece to it.
Yep.
Cool. All right, so let's dive in.
Yeah, let's walk in. So let me first kind of lay out a little bit of context about Bubble as a company.
Okay.
And then we'll walk through the experience of Bubble.
Yep.
And some things that I think are kind of interesting there, and be interesting to chat about each of our perspectives on it. So at a high level, Bubble is essentially allows anyone to create applications or software.
Okay.
And when you look at doing what really, I would say the reason that they started this was their own experience, as many of us have experienced. It's really expensive and costly and time consuming to create software because it's complex. There's a lot of complexity there. It's a big engineering effort. You need a lot of engineering resources. And so what they felt they could do is try and really become a way to help enable anyone who has the idea of what maybe how to produce value through software and give them a tool that could actually let them create that even if they're not a quote unquote engineer.
Okay.
They've actually been around for a long ass time in internet years. They've been around for 7 years now.
Wow.
They kicked out in 2012. And from pretty near the beginning, they've been kind of like, they've been bootstrapped like the majority of their life. They, were there's 2 co-founders, Emmanuel and Josh. Emmanuel, I apologize. We actually know Emmanuel a little bit and I'm going to mispronounce your last name, but Strashnov?
Yeah.
And Josh Haas. And so they started it, bootstrapped it, but they've intentionally tried to build a business in the way that's not as common anymore, right? They didn't take funding early. They purposely wanted to be able to grow the business around paying customers. And actually, I thought there was some interesting stuff I found here that Josh had mentioned. So they recently got funding, and in the context of getting funding recently, they talked about why they did that.
Okay.
So the reason they took that first route, and this is Josh speaking here, taking this route of self-funding allowed us to make choices that would have killed a startup that was funded. We invested in a deep, complicated product rather than something that we could have sold quickly but was shallow. We prioritized existing customers over always finding new ones. They saw early adopters who were willing to put up with weird stuff, basically, right? Now, they've just recently got a small seed funding round of $6 million. And their goal with that is essentially to try and scale. So they feel like now they've hit the business and they're trying to make it more stable and try and really scale it out.
So did they call it, sorry, real quick, Did they call that a seed fund or a Series A?
Well, from what information I found, they said it was seed. But.
Wow. Okay. I guess disclosure too on this. You, just like always, you introduced me to this tool. I've seen you build things in this tool. It's pretty fascinating what you've built.
Well, there's a product we built that's kind of interesting. We can talk.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you built a number of things, but yeah, I mean, even the first version of
Weave was built in Bubble.
Yeah, and I think you did it really, really fast. So, yeah, I mean, I guess we have some experience with this tool.
Yeah, and I think the good and the bad, right? Which I want to dive into. Let me make sure there's something other really helpful to know about them.
So real quick, what's their vision? Like, what's their goal? Are they competing? And are they competing against like a framer, or like who are they competing with?
I think this is actually, I was going to dive into this. I think this is one of the challenges that they initially found was trying to actually paint in someone's mind why they existed. Because when they first rolled around, they were competing with like the web flows and that of people perceive them as a way to go build a website.
Okay.
And for those that aren't as familiar with software, there's a pretty big gap between building something like a website and building something that actually can be functional and it can
like a full-blown application.
Exactly. It can have custom functionality. It does certain things. It could be shopping, whatever, right? So there are other tools that do this, and the space they really play in that kind of goes to that let's help everyone do this is what's often called no code or visual programming.
No code tools, yeah, sure.
And they if you ask about their vision, I think that's really the vision of like how can we try and this will go to a little bit what I really think is kind of the secret sauce of something that's smart they've done that others can do. Is they did something really foundational from the beginning, which is they separated the notion of programming from engineering. So traditionally, like those have always felt synonymous. If you're programming, and that means you're an engineer that knows how to write a program in like a way that a machine can understand, code and so forth. And they made an interesting observation from the start. You know what? Programming is basically just a set of instructions. It's when you actually put together a wedding reception, you're programming, right? You decide the tables go there, you decide this thing is going to happen in that order, etc. So there's plenty of super bright people on the planet Earth who know that they want to achieve something. They know the steps that something should happen, and they know like the rules, maybe the business rules, etc. But they don't know that whole layer of just code machine language. Mm-hmm. So what their goal has been and their vision is like, how can we help people who can truly program cross that gap of the technical layer? Okay. And there's some more we'll dive into there as far as I think that they've done this really powerful. But that's, I would say, one of the really key concepts.
Did you get a sense of their revenue, by the way?
I do know,
aren't they on like Indie Hackers or something? I swear they have it public somewhere.
Oh, do they really?
I swear.
Oh, I didn't
have to
catch
look.
it. So I do know their kind of general numbers. So they have, as of today, they basically have, the numbers they publish are, they have over almost 300,000 applications have been built on their platform. Wow. And that could be anyone spinning up a project, but a lot of them, right? Built by over 300,000, like 325,000, what they call visual developers. So even if you cut that number in half, that's still pretty striking.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they've actually had a number, they had a number of companies that have been built on their platform that have actually, a few have gone through Y Combinator. One had, I can't remember it now, one had a pretty big funding that came through it. And then another one's, even was an example they point to that's making like $1 million ARR, just, on their platform. So I think that's probably a good overview of them.
Okay.
To maybe dive into the experience itself. Okay. Yeah. So to talk a little bit about like maybe their branding and their identity. So there's this core problem you have, right? Again, like you asked me if they compete with Framer. So those who aren't familiar, Framer is a design tool. It lets you do really rich prototypes, right? Sure. I will say that as us working in product and design, the main reason I've usually been interested in Bubble is seeing them as a really rich prototyping tool. It's something I could get something that was the constant challenge you have in this field is when you're making something before you invest in an engineering team is you want to figure out like, am I making the right thing? And just showing people pictures and like dumb prototypes doesn't really let you test reality. And the more you can make rich, robust prototypes, the more you can actually see, does this idea, how does it play out in real world conditions? Sure. So I thought Bubble was pretty amazing for that. And it is. That said, I don't think that's their goal. Their goal is truly to have people have production, commercial, business applications. They want to be, what was something they mentioned? They want to be the primary platform for startup creation. They want to really just increase momentum and remove friction towards getting, an idea out there. Exactly. Okay. So I think there was that challenge of them like trying to carve out a space of they're not a website tool, they're actually this tool. So I talked a little bit about how they separated the idea of engineering from programming. There are other tools that have been around like this that let you go and kind of through a web interface stitch together an application. Another thing that they did that I think was, I imagine by design it probably, but I think is hyper intelligent, they adopted a certain way, I call it a mental model within the application. So I'll give you an example. So if you looked at some other applications that were kind of on parity with the abilities that Bubble would give you, where I could put together, you know, a database of information, I could hook up certain functionality, etc. Those other tools were really constrained in always talking about it and thinking about it in engineering terms. They'd use words like database. They'd use words like really SLQ kind of weird things, and it just was unless you had gone through that point of understanding, there's a disconnect, right?
Yeah.
So what they've done from the start, some of it's just semantics, where what they call things, but I think more importantly, they've kind of take a step back, even though they're engineers, and said, what are these things really about? So it's not about a database; it's about the things you manage. It's about, you know, when you actually have when you do things, it's kind of a flow of work, you know, workflow, etc. So those simple changes of having that mental model be really accessible and frankly just common sense,
right,
is across their product. And so I think what that did is it really helped them be able to get in, you know, as far as like to really welcome a broader audience. Because you have some people who are curious, right? They may have heard about it from somewhere because they like, you know, like you're at a startup, you know, kind of not an incubator, but like some event, right?
Yeah.
And you hear about tons of tools, but when someone started to scratch the surface of this, they could really start to actually get into an experiment and play successfully because they didn't have this immediate wall they ran into.
Okay, so all right, so yeah, I feel like I got a good understanding of them and what they're trying to do. Walk me through just new user experiencing their brand, and then maybe just like that first time experience signing up and getting into it and starting to play with the product.
So once you kind of understand why you might be using them, as you go into it, like mini SaaS products like this, you can go, you know, into a free plan, and as you start using it, they've got, I would say, some stuff. There's some things that they do in their onboarding that are helpful in the sense that they, you know, you look at their plans here. I don't know if it shows the pricing or not. Oh, by the way, for those, I don't think I mentioned this, but they are a closed platform, meaning the stuff you build on here is hosted on them, right? Kind of like building on Webflow or something. And that's where, you know, kind of their primary revenue. So when you go into it, you'll start, and rather than just a blank canvas, I mean, you can go start a project, but they actually have these kind of interactive, and other products do this too. They have interactive exercise, like documents and projects you can go through and actually try and understand like how this tool works, right? And they really encourage and push that. And I would say like overall in a product like this, that does a pretty good job of getting you familiar with how the tool kind of basically thinks and gives you that core tool set.
Sure.
That idea of, let's see, so you get into, I think there's another thing that I mentioned, kind of touched on a tiny bit, is that you can experiment in here pretty successfully. So let's say you go in, and we already have the one ingredient is that they're not trying to confuse things by terms you don't know. So there's common sense, right? That kind of sets you up as you start to play, and you're doing even, Jay, pretty complex stuff. Like you'll go in and you'll like say, you know, I want to take this piece of information, I want to do this to it, and then this and this and this. But the way they've teed it up in their experience is that if you just can think through those steps, you can kind of follow the tool. So you can experiment pretty successfully and bump against the edges and the walls and usually find your way through. Plus a little bit of the, you know, kind of onboarding exercises they have. The real thing that's really given them a ton of benefit for both new and ongoing users is their community. So they just have
like a forum or something?
Yeah, it's just a forum, a forum. But
everybody's just super engaged.
Yeah, and it's a good. I think it's interesting to unpack that for a minute.
How did because you found this really early? How did they get on everybody's radar? Like how did they find everyone?
I think what happened there, and
because I even remember you would like have conversations with the CEO.
Yeah, well, it's a good. Well, I mean, this is like I knew him early enough when they had the time to talk to anyone.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, actually, this could have been. I don't know if it was like 2000. It may have been like a year or two after. They were pretty new. It's like May 13. But they I think as far as I got on my radar because I'm just a dork that always follows this kind of stuff. But as far as generally, a couple of things happened. One is this whole idea of these kind of tools and this marketplace of these no-code tools in the last 2 years is really, that whole market sea has kind of risen a bit. So I think the people have even knowing to look for such a thing, that I have an idea for, you know, in today's day and age, you know, making a business around software, and there's a way to do it that I might be able to do with more leverage. So that's already like this. There's just more people looking for this kind of
right,
tool.
and that's my point. Is that's been in the last couple of years, but since it's been around since then, you know what I mean? Like, do you remember How they were.
You're saying originally or in the last couple of years?
Yeah. Before the whole no code movement, because that's when you agree that's pretty new.
Yeah, it's certainly within the last couple of years.
So
I think,
I guess I'm curious because here's why I ask: if I'm listening to the show and I'm looking at Bubble, something like Bubble, and I want to build a SaaS product, this is a pretty complex tool, especially for Bootstrap, to be able to build something like this. You know what I mean? So you're putting in a lot of time and effort in hopes that this basically pans out and you can make money and make a living, sell it, whatever you want to do with it. And so, I mean, it seemed like they had quick, fast adoption with it.
Well, I think in retrospect, it looks a little quick. I mean, again, that's a pretty big horizon of like 6-7 years, right? Yeah. So I would think during those first handful of years, I think it was grinding, to be honest. Those guys, and again, this is a little anecdotal, so I don't have all the information, the details behind this, but they definitely took the time to build like the core functionality to let you kind of manage those kind of ideas in a usable way or in a non-engineer way. And then it was by no means perfect, right? And that's even, I think, what they were commenting on, is they were getting in, like they sought out people who could help them get it better, and it would put up with it being, having problems at a certain point. Yeah. But in memory, it was still pretty functional. I think a lot of it, frankly, was them trying to find like their market. And I think there was a little bit of, this is again, just from memory, a little bit of trying to dial in their market fit. I think, I don't know if they were always after the startup market, they may have been. But I remember early on seeing like a manual and stuff, like where they'd be at like, they'd be out just grinding like at the startup meetings. This tool can do this. This tool can do this.
Trying to let they really were. Okay.
Oh yeah, totally. I think they've hit definitely a lot of momentum in the last couple of years. They mentioned they actually doubled their revenue in 2018 without any marketing. So they've hit this kind of, swell tide, right?
Yeah. And I'm just trying to think as a takeaway watching this and listening to it, you know what I mean? Like sounds like the big takeaway is just more of a community building kind of approach. Right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think we should pause there for a second, because so just to where they're today, they have a massive, so let me actually put this in context. You go to a lot of interesting tools that would be analogous to this, and they try and have a community, right? To get like early adopters to share and talk to each other. There's another one I was using recently called Noodle. That's actually also an amazing, more prototyping tool, but it's always had kind of a start-stop community. And there's this critical mass that one has to hit in the communities, right? Like you've got to get to a point where the engine's kind of thriving on itself. Mm-hmm. And I do think like early on what had happened is Bubble had enough kind of momentum from just some of the core work they've been doing that when they actually started doing a community, there was, enough people that wanted to use it. So I think one ingredient is, just their grind. Another one is they actually have kind of created almost a new kind of job, as it were, these Bubble professionals. And it's a pretty big, well, I don't want to say big. So there's like people who, that's their professional thing that they make.
Yeah, you hire a Bubble expert.
Oh yeah, they're helping people make money, right? Yeah. Not only in their individual products. So those people start to become kind of increasing experts because of their exposure to the tool, and they have an invested interest in also being part of that community and supporting it. And so, for example, when you and I started looking for help in this, right? We looked there, and that's where we found these people. Yeah. And then you start to have this kind of critical mass that starts to happen, where they just hit that tipping point. Yeah. But as far as grinding to it, I think it was really. To some of what Josh even said in that quote, right? They took the time or lined up things in such a way that they could really kind of build that snowball. And they probably had, I wouldn't be surprised to find out they had a couple of years of trying to push that snowball, and then they started getting some momentum on it.
Okay, so recapping here. So kind of when we get into the experience piece of the show, we usually talk about it like being in a relationship with someone. You're dating someone, what's the good, what's the bad, what are they doing that's weird, what are you doing that you like? From my perspective, and I have not used it near as much as you, but I do remember those times where we get in, and again, I wasn't moving anything around, I wasn't doing anything, just seeing it. You could tell there was a lot of power from if you really understood it, but it definitely was overwhelming. There was lot, there was just a lot to do, and there was a lot to pick up, and even like the nomenclature of this and that, and the different naming conventions. Yeah. And you really had to understand it. And then I do remember. Maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit further here, but I do remember when we finally had launched our prototype, we actually had, customers using it. We, like that hosted piece you just mentioned, that's their business. We felt like it was almost like we jumped from like $0 to $20 to $500 a month.
Oh,
do you remember that?
No, we never hit 500 on that.
Didn't we get pretty high? We had like a ton of nodes what do they call them that you ramp up for the speed?
It did go up, but it wasn't. Okay. I think that may have been some other things we had in the background. But but to your point, I think it's, if I look at some of the friction they have, I did say that. Okay, so I'm actually, it's funny you mention that because it takes me back to some of my early experiences with it. You could explore and play around with small projects that let you actually kind of start to get some confidence. As you got into more complex things, early on, especially when that community wasn't as rich as it was today, there were times it was a little headbanging. And that was just because they're doing complex stuff. But yeah, it wasn't always perfect by any stretch. The UX, as it were, like the user experience and just the general kind of design of task, activities within their product, they need to invest more there.
Okay.
To my understanding, they are.
Okay.
There's some usability things in that thing that can certainly be improved. They've invested in other places first. Like they've gotten to a point where it was okay and pretty good, but there's been like when you use it, you're like, I really wish I did X or Y, right? And when I look at why they've received funding, I think that's one of the areas. The other one you mentioned is performance, or is the hosting and the performance. So I don't know if the cost was so much an issue, but we ran into some performance issues.
Yes, we did.
And others can as well. And I think that's tricky in the sense that with any of these like businesses, right? Like it's not like an open source framework. So you are basically buying to be on their framework. So it's interesting. The things that actually, before I looked into why they got their funding, because they've actually written about why they decided to take money since they were such a bootstrap company. We'd experienced these pains. We experienced the UX being kind of a pain in the ass at the time. We experienced performance. It looks like the reason that they've actually taken money is not so much to build they're pretty happy with they've got a good customer base. They want to grow it further, but they feel like the robustness and the polish and some of these things to really have, like, for example, a really even like world-class like infrastructure. That's what they're trying to invest in.
So that makes me think. So experience, building a great experience where your customers want to stick and stay. Mm-hmm. I wonder how their churn, rate is, retention rate, because I wonder if a lot of startups come in, they kind of build, in a sense like we did. We build a prototype, we see if it actually works, get it in front of a couple of people, and then we're like, oh yeah, this is on to something. Or I give up. You know what I mean? I wonder if a couple months in, people on a free plan have a little paying plan, and then they leave. Or
even it makes me think too of like people might be you can write up and down their plans. They're one of those companies where you can basically now I want to notch up to these things. Other times I can turn it down. So those people are still around. Man, I'd love to look.
I just wonder I'd
be curious like how much is a yo-yo customer.
Right, and even if you are Bubble, the stability of that and trying to ride that revenue wave or profitability wave and like. Yeah, I don't know. That'd be super interesting to understand.
Oh, definitely. I mean, they're guys that I will say at some point we should chat with them. We should get them on an interview and just like I have a mad respect for what they've done, but there's a lot of stuff they can and want to do. So they're in that interesting spot where they're not a perfect company. A few are. They've gotten past like a few of the first landmines a company can have, right? Or more than a few, a ton of them.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited for where they can go, but it'll be interesting to see what they've got in their heads for next.
And I'm curious too, like what their ambitions are, because, and I mean this is a weird thing I just want to touch on though. So this is a company that's been around for 7 years. Most companies today, when they go even with a pre-seeded or just an idea concept, you can get up to $5 million pretty easy, depending on who your team is, what you've done in the past.
Well, and with a demonstrated audience,
Right. Or if you even have just a tiny bit of an audience, like a few paying customers, getting a $5 million check is not that difficult in today's landscape or climate, right? And so, it's weird. I mean, but I say it, and I'm cautious in saying it because I love that they're bootstrapped, and it sounds like they have a lot of the same ideologies we do, right? In terms of like just not giving away equity and not controlling our destiny. But like, if you're gonna take some money,
you're saying
this point,
why
you're gonna give something like take a little bit more so you can just. You don't have to raise again.
Gotcha. So
you know what I mean? You just one raise, or I don't know.
Your question isn't about when they took it, but about the amount they took at this stage in the company.
Yeah, the amount, the stage, and then they have all the chips, right? They have all the cards in their hands to say, we have paying customers, we have a product that's working, we are profitable. They were.
I'm not. You're a little more familiar with these sources than I am, but they were actually funded by where did I write this down? I want to say it's Signal Fire. Yeah, Signal Fire. So, which, to my understanding, I don't know a lot about Signal Fire, but they are, I think they're like specifically trying to do a balance of like funding as well as access to, kind of certain resources. And
okay, maybe.
So I don't know. Maybe I don't know if it was an equity thing. We could ask them, but it
could have been too like an indie VC kind of bootstrappery type fund. You know what I mean? I don't know. We'll have to look at Signal Fire.
But you bring up an interesting point. Like, if your goal is really to, I hate to use the word scale because they've done a decent job, but like to maybe like shore up and really set up the foundation for where you go next.
Well, and their timing is perfect.
Oh yeah,
they were right there before everything. They've been in the wave.
Well, and they're
about to hit it. They're going up against Webflow.
Webflow's not even the same categories as guys.
Oh, it's not. Oh, my bad. So visual, but like no code, isn't that?
Yeah, it's become bigger. I mean, to my understanding, and I think
I mean, they kind of are, right? I mean, maybe not.
No, you couldn't do all the functional stuff, the custom functional stuff on Webflow. You could do really nice websites.
Okay.
But I will say, to my understanding, there's a few others, but you could, like, it's getting easier to mess around with code and bolt together React stuff in that. And there's tools playing around with that side of it, and that might get better. But as far as like not having to give any care to that, these guys, I still think, to my understanding, are like they're functionally ahead. My only problem when we use them is just more like a little bit of the performance stuff and a little bit of like it's just cumbersome to sometimes do the work. Now, that said, we'd use it kind of episodically, right?
Yeah.
I am still super impressed by what we can knock out.
Oh, yeah. No, it was awesome.
I will say, if I try and look at like what I would take away as translatable things from them to someone else, I think there's a couple that stick out in my mind. And I don't think you can undersell, the power of these. One is that idea of like really taking a step back from whatever the hell you're doing. And honestly, the same would even apply like in our business, right, Jay? Like we have these, certain inside baseball, right? When we talk about like, retention and all this other stuff. It's interesting, but that's stuff that unless you've like lived and breathed that, it's not always like doesn't make sense.
Sure, yeah.
So their idea of how they actually abstracted like the work and that mental model and separating some of those things that had always been considered to be synonymous of like programming, engineering, and making that mental model accessible, that's really given them a lot of leverage and latitude in becoming a tool that's different from other people.
Right.
And we see it in other spaces too, where someone takes a step back and they're like, well, hold on a second, there's another way for me to approach this.
Yeah.
And that's a really big one. Another one is, frankly, that they've just the community building. I think they've had some things kind of play in their favor. They've worked their asses off too, and when I see them in there. They've also been hamstrung by that a little bit, frankly. So like on the support side of their experience, they're in there like answering stuff, but they are a small team, so sometimes there's a little bit of a gap. And so that's been backfilled, thankfully, by these key members of their community who've really become, kind of core to it. But that idea of like everything you can invest in that community, every ounce of that's paid back.
Well, yeah, that reminds me of just even like something like simple as Product Hunt, like the community aspect that he used to drive that business. Like, that's really hard to pull off, but they've done a good job.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely resulted in that, right? They wouldn't be. I don't think. I'll put it this way: if they didn't have that today, it'd be a great tool, but it's at least half of the value of the product.
Yeah, because you talked a lot about their forums and even the experts that we could get and all that type of stuff.
I mean, any sort of, but also just for even like most people don't want to raise their hand and ask.
Yeah.
And so the more you can have a way for someone to find that, and some of that comes over time, right?
Sure.
The last thing I'd mention is I think they did take a very intentional approach to how to grow their business. To your point, they could have raised money a lot earlier.
Well, I love that they didn't. I wasn't knocking that.
Yeah, no, I know you wouldn't. But this idea, and I just want to repeat it, like, they actually, because there's a lot of temptation to get out in the marketplace as quick as possible. So for them, they could actually take the time to build what they wanted to build based on what they thought. Now that said, you're an idiot if you're kind of building in a vacuum. But they were getting customers in earlier. That idea of how can I actually focus on the existing customers rather than always having to get new bodies in the door. Love that. And then this idea as well of like getting people in to actually like being okay with releasing stuff that might not be perfect, but let's get it better. And they have that feedback loop and that oxygen on what they're building.
Okay, so I mean, I actually agree with everything that you just said, and I can see that just a little bit. I used it and just see them. What are just like maybe some things to take away, or like things that they could improve on that people can kind of take away? Because this is
definitely
mature product.
I think and this is my own bias, but the power of actually having a well-designed tool that really reduces friction, and it just frankly just core user, and especially with these tools where you're building other things in them. I'd love to have that feel more robust. I'll give you an example. So Figma, we've talked about. Figma is also a web-based tool. I can download a client in that, an application in that on my computer that's also still accessing that. And that has been optimized a little bit for that experience. It also just feels more robust. Like I just feel less like I'm going to actually close a tab, and just feels there's just a more solidity to it. So that's a part of it. The other part is just if you go through and actually figure out where these little friction points are and you get rid of them, it reminds me like the old like Steve Jobs kind of stuff. Like where they could shave a second off. He's like that second happens like 200 times a day.
Right.
So like you can shave these little things and really nail down that UX. I hope they're doing it soon. But
to be clear, so Bubble does not have a desktop app or like a Mac app. It's just all
web
browser.
Yeah, unless you spin up some weird version of yourself through Electron or something.
Kind of weird.
And then I would say that like I know that they're aware of this and they've been investing in other places with what they could, and so it's hard for me to criticize it from the outside. But I would really have valued an earlier investment. They leveled up their design a few years ago. They haven't invested in that area for a while in their application design, and I think that's past due.
Yeah.
And then the performance one, like, I don't know. I think they're getting better there, but if they really want to be something...
Yeah, like where people, like they don't lose people once they get something stood up, right? You want to be able to scale.
And I know that's what they're trying to do right now, but it's like you wouldn't go use Amazon services if half the time...
I was going to say, that's probably the biggest thing right there that you just said that we had, you know, we probably might even still be building on it, honestly.
I mean, a lot, like most companies are building their products on top of other people's products. It's not uncommon. Yeah. It's, you know, it is what it is. But for them... I'm not against it, but I have to say at a certain point, I'd be considering moving myself off it.
Yeah.
I don't have that kind of level of security in it yet.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's really good. All right. So kind of the questions we always end with, would you recommend this product?
I would say if you are essentially, if you are someone looking to, honestly, yeah, man, I would. If you're looking to basically make software and I would... And you agree with me that it's worth getting software out in the world and seeing if anyone gives a rat's ass, and if you're on the right scent of the idea before you go invest tons of time and hours and money, this is the perfect tool for it.
Okay.
Now you could stay on it depending on the thing. You might outgrow it. But on a side note, if you're doing any prototyping, like I mentioned earlier, 100% would this makes sense.
So yeah, because I was just gonna say we used this originally before Weave and another company that we had where it was an established company around almost 10 years. Yep. And you were building extra functionality and tests and things like that just on alongside of it. Exactly,
when that's warranted. So certainly. And then the stuff I know we also talk about what we tell the founder stuff, like Emmanuel and Josh, not if, but when we get to talk to them, I think it'd be the same. I'd love to know a little bit more about kind of like, they've like where they've gone, where they're going. And honestly, I'd just be like, from my designer heart to their engineering and business hearts, I'd be like, let's make sure you do invest and double down on that experience side, the product UX experience side.
Yep. Well, awesome, man. Love the product. Hats off to you guys.
Yeah, great job, guys.
Great show. The drink was. I love the drink. I realized.
I think I may have loved it a little bit more than you.
I realized after drinking this, the citrusy thing, like when I drink like lemonade.
Yeah,
I just don't. I don't know. I get like my glands.
You might be allergic to limes.
I just don't. Yeah.
Are you like it's a
this one was a little citrusy for me.
So when we have like the shrimp and avocado thing, that's when you might really.
I'll still down it when we're done with this show. But,
all right.
So anyway, thanks for coming. As always, thanks for coming to the experience. Stay for the drinks. Clayton will be whipping up this bubbly drink, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks so much, guys. Take care.
The Experience is brought to you by Weave.com, the innovative tool that helps SaaS companies automate their customer retention. As always, thanks for being a supporter of the show. You've had the experience, now stay for the drink.
So we're making a Southside Fizz. This is an older drink actually as well. This is early 1900s. And a little bit of a twist, it's become more common recently. I've put a little cucumber in it, so let's see what it's about. So first we're gonna get ourselves some cucumber and mint. So I'll cut off, we'll make a double here, but we'll do about 3 cucumbers per drink, or slices rather. Actually we'll do a little less, we'll do 5 total since we're doubling up. I'm gonna toss those in here. And I'm gonna toss about 8 to 10 sprigs of, or leaves of mint per drink. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna muddle the mint and the cucumber, and my God, if you could smell this, it smells amazing. Fresh herbs, fresh juice, that stuff just makes all the difference. So I've got that in there. We're going to put in a 3/4 ounce of simple syrup. Simple syrup is just basically 1 part sugar, 1 part water. Here we're just using a neutral simple syrup. So we'll do 3/4 for one drink, 3/4 for the other. And then we're going to lightly muddle that. So muddling that is essentially trying to release some of the flavor. When you muddle mint, or in this case we've got cucumber in here as well, you don't need to kill it or murder it. If you do it too hard, you'll start to release some of the actual kind of sharp and unpleasant flavors. So something like this, I'm just gonna lightly muddle it. The cucumber's gonna press into some of the other mint down at the bottom. And that sugar gives us just basically a little bit of grease for the wheel here to kind of work the muddler. This is I'm gonna do a little bit more since I've got more ingredients in here from this double. But at that point I've released most of those flavors, and I have what looks like a big sugary squish mess in here, but we can smell more of it. So at this point we're going to add lime juice and gin. So this is kind of the neighborhood of a gimlet. A gimlet is basically lime juice, sugar, and gin. But as with most cocktails, just a few small changes make the world a difference. Grab our juicer over here. So we'll do 3/4 ounce of lime juice per drink. Which actually fantastically works out to be just about half a lime. And we will add 2 ounces of gin per drink. As with all things in life, using good stuff yields good results. So we want to make sure there's at least a decent gin in here, right? That's a good one. So we got 1 ounce, 2 ounce. I'll be lazy and use this big side. 3/4 ounce. So now we've got 2 parts gin in there. We're gonna get some ice in here. Give myself a little bit of room.
And again, so we're making a double.
Yep.
So you're adding everything twice.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so now what we need to do is we're basically chilling the drink and diluting it a little bit with ice. Water is a really important piece of every cocktail, so you gotta make sure you get enough in. So we wanna shake this for about 8 to 10 seconds. When we shake it, we're not trying to like piston it back and forth because it busts up the ice too quick. You're almost trying to make a little circle. And when you've got ice in there, it actually creates a vacuum. That's why you just pain in the ass to get it apart. So if you kind of hit that with a vacuum, kind of break that seal. And then we need to get our drinks ready, our glasses. So with this, it's a kind of a fizz drink. These are normally served in a upright glass called a Collins glass. So we'll get ourselves some ice in these. Alright, and then we're going to put about 1.5 ounces of soda water in the bottom of each of these.
Sorry, I didn't mean to push that button.
This is what keeps the job exciting. Alright, so what we're doing on this is, you can sometimes add this on top or shake it in, but if you shake the soda water in the drink, it tends to lose the carbonation. And by adding it on the bottom first, and then pouring our cocktail over the top, we end up mixing a lot of it right out of the gate. So to strain this, we're not going to use a regular strainer. We're going to also pass it through another strainer. It's called double straining. And that's going to keep all those little bits of mint from getting in between our teeth. Let's see how we did here. And one last thing. I'd be ashamed to let the rest of this stuff go to waste. So let's really dial up the experience, and we will garnish it. And we'll also put in a little bit of mint. And on mint, when you have it at the top of a drink or any herb, if you actually kind of just smack it, you'll open up some of the aroma. And what we're getting here is that'll hit your nose as you're taking the drink, kind of like an orange, when you rub an orange on a glass for an old fashioned. And it just helps that overall kind of experience of the drink itself. And that plus a lot of water on the counter here gives us our Southside Fizz.